Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of Baba Yaga's Magic, the magic of the Rushnyk. The word Rushnyk translates as towel, but a Rushnyk is not a mere cloth to dry our hands. A Rushnyk is an embroidered talismanic cloth used for empowering us throughout our lives. These intricately woven or embroidered cloths protect and bless us from birth to death and every major life event in between. They are used to bless the bread and salt that we offer honored guests. They're used in ritual, and they hang above the sacred icons in the holy corner of our homes. In this episode, I will take you on a journey to discover the magic of these beautiful talismans, tell you how the Rushnyk was used in ceremonies of the past, and teach you how you can use one in your own magic today. But before we dive in, I want to tell you something. Do you have a quick question that could be helped with a tarot reading? Do you want to just have some tarot fun? And do you want to help support Ukrainians? Well, do you know there's a way you can get a live tarot reading with me and help support seniors in Ukraine who are desperate for food? Join me on Wednesday nights for a fun tarot gathering over YouTube and give some essential support to seniors in Ukraine. It's called Tarot for Kindness. And every Wednesday night, me and my friend Ivan Subotin in Kyiv get together over YouTube Live. He shares stories about the 200 seniors that he brings much needed groceries to every month. And I do live tarot readings with 100% of the proceeds going to purchase these essential groceries. It all takes place on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern, and 5 a.m. Eastern European Time. Ask your questions in the chat and donate $10 per card to get a reading from me. $10 is a one-card reading from me. $20 is a two-card reading. $30 is a three-card reading. $50 is a five-card reading. $100 is a 10-card reading, and so on. You can donate as much as you want, of course, and get that many cards in your reading. It's really a lot of fun. So if you want to join us, subscribe to youtube.com/Madam Pamita and click the notifications bell. And go to tarotforkindness.com to find out more. I'll see you Wednesday night for some tarot magic with a heart. So let's talk about the Rushnyk. The Rushnyk is a ritual cloth. It's rectangular in shape, and usually it's made from hand-spun linen or flax, made out of flax, or hemp. And usually it's about 3 feet or a meter long and about 16 inches or 40 centimeters wide. Sometimes it can be plain white, but more often it has beautiful embroidery or woven designs at either end, sometimes on the complete length of the cloth. The word Rushnyk, which is the singular, Rushniki is the plural, Rushnyk is the singular. The word Rushnyk derives from the word rukan, which means hand. And while it can refer to an ordinary towel that people use, like the towels in your bathroom, the ceremonial Rushnyk is very special because it is elaborately ornamented. These embroidered designs or woven designs and motif are symbolic, and they really represent the power of the Rushnyk. These embroideries add magic of protection, blessing, strength, abundance, and fertility, and all kinds of things. And this makes the Rushnyk a sacred cloth. We place the Rushnyk over the icons in the corner or in the holy corners on the home altar. People place Rushnyks on crosses, on graves, and they place them on holy wells and holy springs. These Rushnyk really reflect that idea that textiles, especially Rushniki, are magical, they're talismanic, and they're very, very old. The long rectangular shape of the cloth, because it is like a long cloth, almost like a big scarf, you can imagine. Very thin, very slim, not too wide, only 40 centimeters, a little over a foot wide. In some cases, maybe 2 feet wide, depends on the Rushnyk and the maker, of course. But they're very long, like a scarf. They can go at least 3 feet, sometimes 5, 6, 8 feet long. This shape of the cloth really reflects this concept behind the cloth, which it is there for your life's journey. Just like a road stretching out in front of you, the long Rushnyk cloth reflects that journey of one's life. The Rushnyk cloth shape in that long rectangle also is believed to be a kind of a pathway to the divine between humanity and divine energy. They are powerful talismans, bringing blessings to anyone or anything that they touch or they are near to. Important life events in Slavic countries are celebrated with Rushniki. So not only are they decorative and talismanic and protective, they are also used, and they're used in these beautiful life events, these important life events, these rites and rituals. Now, embroidered Rushniki is probably the most popular Rushniki that you'll see. These embroidered Rushniki are pretty typical. We also see woven ones, and I'll talk about those in a minute. The name Rushnyk is the Ukrainian name. In Russian, it can be Rushnyk or Ruchnik. In Belarus, it's Ruchnik or Rusnik, and in Rusin, it's Ruchnik. So there's variations on the name depending on what country you're talking about, what language you're speaking. The Ukrainian ritual cloth, the Rushnyk, stays with you from birth to death. The symbols, the colors, and the designs are all this encoded talismanic message that will protect you throughout life. Now, in ancient times, Rushniki were used to cover shelters for travelers or honored or dear guests that came in, people that were honored guests that came in. You might use the Rushniki to protect them as they were staying with you. But nowadays, it's used mostly by people in families and their homes, and that's when it's used. The first Rushnyk that happens is when a baby is born. That's when we start to see them. The baby would be wrapped in that Rushnyk and also carried to their baptism, being wrapped up in the Rushnyk. Now, a Rushnyk for a little baby would be embroidered in bright and cheerful colors. It wouldn't have any black in it, just beautiful colors and the white cloth. The godmother of the baby would prepare and make that Rushnyk and wrapping the baby in it. It was a symbol of telling the baby that they were going to have an easy road or a good road in their life. Their path would be as bright and as beautiful as this colorful cloth that they wrapped around the baby. After the baptism, the baby would be wrapped again in the Rushnyk, and on top of it, the godparents would put gold or silver coins on top of that Rushnyk with a wish for well-being and prosperity in that baby's life. Now, the Rushnyk that the baby was wrapped in could not be given to anyone, because if that Rushnyk was given to someone else, it was believed that it would break the life path of that child. So it stayed with that kid. Now, during Soviet times, when there was, no religion was allowed, no spiritual practices were allowed, atheism was the official religion, then oftentimes these Rushnyk were not embroidered. They were just plain white cloths. And so, but now that, of course, since religion and spiritual practices are freely able to be practiced in Ukraine, then these cloths are being embroidered again. And of course, we have the antique ones as well. Rushnyk were also used in weddings, in engagement, and in fact, the matchmaking process was called the Rushnyk presentation because it was such an important part of that matchmaking. And then it was also used in the wedding ceremony as well. So in the matchmaking ceremony, they would do this very ancient kind of symbolic, I would say, like acting out an ancient rite. So the parents of the daughter who was going to get married, if she wanted to marry him, when he and his crew, his family, his brothers, his family would come over, they would wrap a rushnyk over their shoulders. And this was to capture the foreign clan who was trying to rob us of our daughter, right? This is what the daughter would do, to say, I agree to this, but we're going to tie you up. Now, they obviously didn't really tie them up, but it's symbolic of that idea that a young woman might be abducted and taken away to another family far away. Obviously, this isn't what's happening. There's no abduction involved, but this is symbolic of that concept that the young woman is leaving her family and going into the family of the husband. Now, they would also take the bride to be, or let's say the young woman and young man who were intending to get engaged and get married, would grab the rushnyk, the ends of the rushnyk, and they might tie their hands together with it. Now, this is also a practice that's done during the wedding ceremony. Very similar if you know about Celtic practices and hand fasting. It's very similar to that idea that the two hands, the hands of the couple, are tied together with that rushnyk to show that they are joined together. It's symbolic of that. Oftentimes there was another ritual that was enacted where the family of the young man would come to visit the family of the young woman, and if all was well and this couple was going to get married, the mother of the young woman would bring a basket full of rushnyki, and then she, the daughter that was going to get married, would distribute these rushnyki to each of the family members of his family. So after he gave his gifts to her family, these were the gifts that she distributed to his family. Now, in some villages of Lichna and some other Western Ukrainian village, they would have to make a rushnyk for the matchmaker herself and have to do 12 more to distribute to the people of her family. So it was a lot of work. You can imagine all the embroidery that was having to be done. If a girl hadn't made her 12 rushnyki that she was going to distribute to the family, she would have to get her friends and family to help, just because it meant that she was industrious if she had 12 of these done. So they didn't want everyone to think that she was lazy. So the family would sometimes help if she hadn't finished all 12 of those and get those done so that they could distribute them to all the women of her future husband's family. And so they wouldn't think she was a lazy person. So now during the wedding process, they would also use the rushnyk to tie together the hands of the couple in marriage. It was thought that the thread of fate are woven together in marriage, and that is why the symbol of connection, tying with the rushnyk, is part of the Ukrainian wedding. Now they'd also do another special thing, which is to have a very special wedding rushnyk on the ground. This standing on a rushnyk is another way of saying getting married. And there's a practice in the wedding ceremony where the bride and the groom stand on that wedding rushnyk. It was placed under their feet. It was also thought that the first person to stand on the rushnyk would be the head of the family. So there was always a race between the bride and the groom to see who was going to be the boss and who was going to stand on that rushnyk first. People said in those days that a house without rushnyki meant a family without children. And it was important, if you were living in an agricultural society, an agricultural community, to have lots of children to work on the farm. So the rushnyk meant there was blessings on the house, and that symbolized not only the aesthetics and beauty in the house, because they were hung over like windows and pictures and the family altar and all of these places in the home, but it was also kind of a calling card for the woman of the house to show how skilled she was as an embroiderer, because this was like, if you saw beautiful embroidery, you knew she was a beautiful embroiderer, and you could, see that and see that she was talented, so it was kind of a way of showing off your skill in other words. Rushnyki could also be used as belts occasionally in ceremony and in rituals. So sometimes the new bride would give her husband or tie a belt around his waist that was actually a rushnyk, or she could use a rushnyk to tie over her head. the old headdresses that the women used to wear to cover their head after they were married were kind of Rushnyk like. And so these acts of doing this, to wrap it around your waist, which was a protective device, or wrap it around your head, was a symbol of that protection and that love and the connection between the couple. Rushniki were also used when people left to travel somewhere. So in the old times, they would give bread, salt, and a handful of earth wrapped in a rushnyk if a loved one was going on a long journey. They believed that those who didn't take a handful of their native land with them when setting out would never come back again. So this was a talisman also wrapped in that rushnyk to bring them back home safely. Now, again, the rushnyk represents a long road, a long journey. So of course, a rushnyk being given to your loved one as before they go on a long trip was a way to help them find their way back home again. If the person was moving away forever, they would give a rushnyk to that person to give them happiness in their new life and to keep as a memory of their family and their home. If a mother was dressing her son for a long journey, the mother gave him an embroidered rushnyk, wishing him happiness. She would say, "May your fate be covered with this rushnyk." So it's another way to say, may you be all right in your travels. May you be safe. Now, rushnyk wasn't done just for these happy ceremonies. We also use a rushnyk in funeral and death ceremonies. A long, extra long rushnyk that's called a sivi or a savan was used to lower a coffin into the ground. The women that would make these rushniki for these funeral ceremonies would make them in advance. So you'd probably make them for your own death or for the people in your family long before anyone was sick or dying or dead. In preparing the funerals also, gifts were often slipped into the coffin, including rushniki and other items that were important to the person. And then there's a lovely practice that when they moved the body that was in the casket out of the house, which is where they would have the visitation, is in the house before they took them to the church or to the cemetery. The Hutzels, who are the people who live up high in the Carpathian Mountains, had a ritual of hanging a rushnyk out the window in the house where the body was. Now, this was to show the deceased spirit where they could go, where they could leave the house, and also give them a little nice path to walk on, so they can see through which window that they should walk, and they have something nice to touch as they are going out. They also would place a pot of water there because the soul would come and clean itself and wipe itself off with the rushnyk, it was believed. Now, in Ukraine, it survived up until the beginning of the 20th century. We still see it coming back now, and in some very traditional cemeteries, you still see this. But it was very customary to hang a rushnyk on the cross in the graveyard. So they would have the tombstone, cross-shaped tombstone, and they would hang a rushnyk on that. And that was believed so that the dead could, after they rose again, dry themselves off, clean themselves off with that rushnyk. If someone was died before they got married, they often would put a wedding rushnyk on there. There was a lot of traditions where if someone wasn't married, it felt like they had a bad death. And so they would treat them as they would a bride or a groom and give them that wedding thing at their funeral. In winter solstice, of course, in Slavic Ukrainian traditions, we invite the ancestors to visit us and celebrate with us. And so because we're inviting those ancestors in, we can also take that long rushnyk and put it in over the window to invite the spirits in through the window, saying, come in. Then when the winter holiday festivities are over, we can escort the spirits out over those beautiful rushniki out the window, saying, now is time for you to go home and your feet must be tired. The road you will travel is not a short one. This path is softer for you. Bless you and farewell. And that way the spirits could walk over the rushnyk back into the other world until the next spirit gathering. Rushniki were also used for in building a house. When they would put that last beam or the main beam of the house, they would carry it up with a Rushnyk and tie a Rushnyk on it, tie a wreath on it as well, put branches on it with fresh flowers. And that was a way to bless the house before, as it was being built. The Rushniki that we see hung over the windows and the doors of many homes are there to protect the home from all the unclean spirits, the evil spirits, the negativity that could get in. And so these beautiful Rushniki are often hung over doors and windows as well. The main type of Rushniki that you'll see, very fancy, very long ones, are the ones that are hung over the home altar. The home altar is called the pukut. So there would be a home altar in the eastern corner where there would be an icon. But before there were icons, actually the Rushnyk itself in that corner was the main artistic focal point, let's say. So these little Rushnyk now are hung over, not little, they're big. They're hung over the icon corner, and the icon, which is the special sacred picture of the saint that's in the home. It's very magical. These Rushniki are hung over those in the corner. We also use, from pagan times, we use Rushniki to bless holy birch trees or bless holy wells and holy springs. We give them as magical gifts to honor our loved ones, and it's always been used as a symbol of hospitality. When we present bread and salt, which is a welcoming gesture to honored guests, it's always presented on top of a Rushnyk. And so that's a way of blessing that bread and salt even more and really showing honor to our guests. Also, let's see what else I have to say about this. Okay. So creating a Rushnyk. The act of spinning thread and weaving linen embodies spiritual power. Linen was whitened in the sun by being left out. The sun, the moon, and the dew would soak into it, and it would be dried by the wind, and all of that energy would go into it. Then that fabric was folded into a spiral or rolled into a ball, and that the person who spun the fibers, who wove the material, put their energy into this. So the fabric that these are made from itself is very magical. Then we add the embroidery that would start to add even more magic and talismanic power to the Rushnyk. I'm gonna tell you about some of the patterns that we find on Rushniki. They're really like a coded language. And if you go into chapter 1 of Baba Yaga's Magic, Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, you'll see a long list of different designs, many of which are used on Rushniki. But the main one that we see on Rushniki that is very special and very famous is the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life is sometimes depicted as a vase with flowers growing out of it, or a tree. Sometimes there's birds on either side of the tree that represent happiness. The shape, however, of this tree or this flower pot, the vazon, can be the tree of life, which is that idea of the upper, middle, and lower worlds, very old spiritual concept. But it also can represent the goddess Berechinia. Berechinia holds her hands up in prayer, like holding her hands up, kind of like a C shape, almost like. And this symbol of the tree, the symbol of the vase, has its arms up in sort of a symbolic representation of Berechinia, who is ancient mother goddess blessing everyone, and so is a beautiful way to bring blessings in your home. Now, in a minute, we're going to learn how the Rushniki are used in magic and divination. But before we do that, I want to share with you about the Slavic magic workshops I teach through Catland Books on the last Wednesday of each month at 4 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll be teaching Slavic magic workshops throughout 2023. People of all spiritual paths and ancestry are welcome, and no magical experience is necessary. Also, too, as a plus, you don't have to turn on your camera or turn on your mic. You can sit and listen, so you can come as you are. It's really a comfortable and fun time. Now, June 28th, I'll be teaching about Rozdorisha, which is Slavic crossroads magic. July 26th, I'll be teaching about Vilivadi Visk, which is Slavic wax pouring. August 30th, I'll be teaching about Voda, Slavic water magic. September 27th, I'll be teaching about Slavic weaving and spinning magic. October 25th, the myth and magic of Baba Yaga. November 29th, Kolyada, the Slavic winter holidays and rituals. And December 27th, I'll be teaching about the peach, Slavic hearth magic. For more information about these workshops and to reserve your spot, go to catlandbooks.com or witchcraftworkshops.com. All right, let's talk about some divination and magic that we can do with the Rushnyk. So on the eve of the Feast of St. Andrews, which is the night of December 12th, a young woman could hang a Rushnyk over her windowsill and say, "Fiancé, fiancé, come and dry yourself." And if the Rushnyk got damp, that meant that that young woman was going to get married in that year, within 12 months. Now, another divination practice that was done with the Rushnyk was to place a Rushnyk under one bowl and a wreath or a flower crown under the other bowl. So to get your fortune told, you had to guess which bowl the Rushnyk was under. And if you picked that one, then that meant it was going to be a happy year for you. Now, Rushnyks are very magical, of course, and yet there's some very, very special magic that happens with them. For example, there's a ancient spell that is called the one-day Rushnyk. So a Rushnyk would be made in one day or one night by the women, all of the women of the entire village, if there was an epidemic. So we're having a crisis, there's an epidemic, and we needed to protect everybody in the village. So such a Rushnyk that was made in one day was endowed with special protective power. And once they finished making it, everyone went outside. They lit a fire near the center of the village, and everyone would walk under the Rushnyk through the fire. Also, people who were sick or children would be carried. And then they burned the Rushnyk as well as the fire and let it go out. And that was a way of cleansing everyone. You are walking through a portal. Fire is for cleansing and cleansing away any negativity. And this beautiful Rushnyk that you're walking under would give you protection. And so that would protect the entire community. Another way we would use Rushnyk magically is to leave them out in the fields before dawn, and then use them to soak up dew, and then squeeze out the dew and collect the water in clay jugs. And this special magical dew that was collected on a Rushnyk would be a remedy for various diseases. Now, collecting that morning dew with a Rushnyk can be used in that dew can be just a few drops of it can be used in your magic, but it's very, very powerful for love magic, for beauty magic, and so on. Another way to do magic with collecting dew from the fields would be to lay out the cloths, and then while that cloth was still damp, bring it in and create a small round loaf of wheat bread with a hole in the middle, kind of like a bagel. And when you're making this, you need this on a dew-covered cloth. Once it's baked, it was said that if you took this bagel bread outside and looked through the hole, first at the sun, and then at someone that you were admiring, they would fall in love with you. So there's a beautiful little magical, very involved, but very magical love spell. So how do you bring the magic of the Rushnyk to your spiritual practice today? Well, the first thing you can do is purchase a Rushnyk. You can purchase a vintage one or a new one. My friend, Katie Carpets, who runs thewitchery.ca, has some beautiful new ones that are made in the traditional style and are made in Ukraine, and she has those for sale. They're absolutely gorgeous. So you can get them there, or you can look online, find a vintage one or a new one somewhere. You can also make one. Look for embroidery patterns online and embroider your own. Once you have one, what can you do with it? Well, you can hang it above your home altar. You can collect magical dew with it, or you can use it in your life cycle rituals. Well, that about does it for this episode of Baba Yaga's Magic. If you would like to get even more info about Slavic magic, then check out the Learn page over at the Parlor of Wonders, where you will find a ton of resources, including workshop, blog posts, past podcast episodes, and of course, the way to join me live over Zoom for the Magic Q&A Tea Party, which takes place every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Just go to parlorofwonders.com, click on the Learn tab to see all the goodies there. Thank you to all the Spell Squad members out there who have subscribed to and shared this podcast with your friends. And thank you to all of you who have left reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. Thank you to Gilles Navarre for production and engineering. And thank you to you for joining me. I'm looking forward to the next episode when we'll be learning about the magic of bread and salt. Until next time, this is Madame Pamita and Baba Yaga saying Zamahiyu to magic, and may all of your stories have the happiest fairy tale endings.